Late Monday night, a federal judge ruled to extend the voter registration deadline in Arizona. The deadline moves from October 5th to October 23rd. A U.S. district judge sided with two advocacy groups who sued to push the deadline back due to pandemic concerns. For more on this, let's bring in CBS News campaign reporter Alex Tin. He is outside of the Maricopa County Recorder's Office in Phoenix, where officials are testing elections equipment today. Alex, really good to talk to you. Thanks for joining us. So tell us more about what the judge said in his ruling.
Well, thank you, Elaine. Glad to be here. What we saw in that ruling last night by Judge Stephen Logan, he's a judge on the federal district court here in Arizona, was that he sided with those two advocacy groups you mentioned, including Mi Familia Vota. That's a relatively prominent Latino advocacy group here in the state, that the voter registration deadline in Arizona should be extended over what he called a significant burden placed on voter registration happening here in the state amid the coronavirus pandemic. Now, we've seen similar challenges like this in the past in other states from other groups who said that the coronavirus pandemic or government health orders or other kinds of restrictions unique to this year have made it hard for them to register enough voters in advance of the voter registration deadline. But here in Arizona, and what the judge said was different, was that Mi Familia Vota cited specific figures for how dramatically their voter registration had dropped during the pandemic. Take, for example, this figure. 1,500 voters. That's the average number of voters that Mi Familia Vota says that they were registering per week before the pandemic. After the pandemic, after the shutdowns, after the government restrictions that came as a result of that, they say they were able to register just around 282 voters per week here in the state of Arizona. Weigh that against the state's burden. What the judge said was that the impact on states sounded like it would be minimal. I actually spoke with Maricopa County officials here. Maricopa County is the largest county by far in the state. It's about 62% of the state's population. Democrats like to call it the largest battleground county anywhere in the country. They said the impact on them would be minimal too. Voters register all year at any time of the year before and after the deadline, and all they need to do is change basically the cutoff for when they consider a voter actively registered, eligible to vote in this election. So if you're an Arizona voter and you haven't registered to vote yet, you still have time until October 23rd.
Yeah, it's really striking to hear you quote those figures. It's a pretty dramatic difference there. So, Alex, what is the status of the other election-related legal battles in Arizona right now?
Well, there's been a flurry of election litigation, not just here in Arizona, but all around the country. But let me give you a sampling of just some of the new developments we've seen just in the past few days right here in this state. The Supreme Court recently took up a challenge over Arizona's ballot harvesting, so-called ballot harvesting, I should say, restrictions. They also decided in the Ninth Circuit to expedite a case over whether Navajo Nation members would be able to get basically an exception made out of the mail ballot deadline here in the state. Curbside voting, that's something that's currently banned in one of the counties here in Arizona. A federal court was just asked by the Arizona Center for Disability Law to reconsider that ban and see whether that's constitutional. And here on the state court level, the Maricopa County Recorder recently celebrated a win in the state's Supreme Court over whether or not some voters would be able to vote by video conference because of certain restrictions based on their disability and the COVID-19 pandemic.
So Arizona is home to some 280,000 Native Americans, significantly more than any other battleground state. What does their recent voting history look like, and how are both parties trying to reach out to them leading up to November?
Well, when you look at the history, it is undeniable that the majority of Native American voters here in Arizona have cast their ballots for Democrats and likely will continue to cast their ballots for Democrats. But their share of the population is significant here, enough so that both parties claim that this year they are making significant attempts to reach out to Native American voters here in the state, both to register them to vote, to get them to cast their ballots, and obviously to do all kinds of things to say, hey, we're looking at you, we think you matter. And you saw, if you're looking for evidence of that, just look at the recent nominating conventions by both parties. Both at the Republican convention and at the Democratic convention, we saw top leaders from the Navajo Nation right here in Arizona on those convention stages speaking to national audiences for those parties.
Yeah, I recall seeing that, clearly a sign neither side is taking any of those voters for granted. Alex Tin for us. Alex, thank you so much.
Thank you.